Could you tell us a bit about how you first got to play with David Bowie and the early years playing with him and his band?
After my parents divorced, my mother and I had to move from quite a big house to a very small flat because we had no money. So we went to a place called Beckenham, and when I was about 14, I was walking down the high street and there were things pinned to trees saying new arts laboratory, which was really a hippie name for a folk club. Performers, poets, musicians, everyone come together. And I thought that was good. So I went down, interested. And it was being run by David Bowie. And we formed, he was a few years older than me, but I played guitar, I wrote poetry and so forth, and I became a regular sort of contributor to the evening's performances on a Sunday night. And then one day, after Space Oddity, which didn't take off originally at all, he decided that we're going to have a free festival in Beckenham Park. And I was invited to perform. And on the morning, his father had just died, 6-7 days beforehand. And he wasn't in the best of moods, but he was going to do this. And they were short of microphones. And David came to me and said, I'm short of microphones. And I said, well, I've got some at my place, because I had my little sort of school band, and I had microphones. And he said, okay, well, let's go and get them. And I showed him where I lived with my mother, and he said, good God, I've just rented this flat in the house opposite you. And I lent him the microphones. We had a day, and it's actually recorded in song, Memory of a Free Festival, if you know the Bowie catalogue. And we're suddenly living opposite each other, and he liked me, I liked him, and I'm not a bad guitar player, and I write songs, and he writes songs, and we formed a sort of a relationship which lasted, and that was it, really. That's how I met him. So I got interested in his folk club and became a contributor. And then he suddenly moved across the road, quite by chance. And I spent more time in his flat. And then he got married to Angie and so on. More time at his place than I did in my own place with my mum. And it was tough times. I mean, no money. And it sort of went from there.
Could you talk a bit about how it was to perform with David Bowie subsequently when he evolved his musical persona and stage persona, and how it was to be around such a high-powered creative individual, essentially, and to perform with him, and also the musical scene that surrounded you at the time, the energy at the time?
What many younger people misunderstand about Bowie is that he's an absolutely multifaceted performer. Before I ever met him, he had worked in mime. He wrote stuff, not songs. He danced. And this is why his first manager thought he might be calm, a sort of middle of the road. I can tap dance. I can do this. I can juggle. I can do anything. Not for David. I think his main strength is that if you really read the lyrics without the music, they are incredible pieces of work. And at the time we're talking about, when he sort of became Ziggy, if you will, from being just a guy with an acoustic guitar playing lovely songs, for 100 people or 200 people in the back of a pub, what changed him into someone who could draw 100,000 people was the fact that he could mannequin himself. He could redress himself to put those lyrics on a wider stage. Daring, very much so. Brave, yes, courageous, and all the words you might, but also very fragile. Because when you're taking that kind of risk as an artist, there's always going to be a chance that it falls flat on its arse. But David has this, to this day I'm sure, I know, has this wonderful way of taking life poetry and putting it into an understandable sort of genre musically. So you think about Space Oddity, you think about Genie, you think about... But after I stopped playing with him, he went on, you know, Station to Station, Rebel, Rebel, China Girl. I mean, but he's constantly moving because he's a restless soul, happy in himself, and happy in it. And he's now married to Iman, of course, for 20-something years. You know, but he still is that irrepressible creative force. Difficult to work with, sometimes. Fantastic to work with, most times. And wouldn't you expect that from someone who's always wanting the best lyric, wanting the best of what he's trying to achieve? Creatively as a force, immaculate, in my opinion. You might say that's because he's a friend and I've worked with him and so forth. But I think if you talk to other famous people in the music world, they would turn around and say, but Bowie's up there with the best. Maybe not the best, but certainly up there in the sort of echelon of true talent.
And if we could talk about your time after Bowie. There's a very popular perception of musicians who either make it or don't make it. I was wondering if you talk about your subsequent career and how you adapted your career and changed your career after the Bowie years, shall we call them?
At the end of 1973, David decided, having already killed the Ziggy character in public at the Hammersmith Odeon in the July, we did one final gig, which was for CBS, a television 1-hour special, which you can see on YouTube. It was called the 1980 Floor Show. 1980 Floor Show. He liked George Orwell.
Someday they won't let you, and now you must agree. Times they are a-changing, and the changing isn't free. You've read it in your tea leaves. Tracks are on TV.
As I said, it's all on YouTube. See what and at the end of that, he went to America. He decided to cross the pond, as it were. The rest of us in the band, as a sort of valedictory gesture, RCA gave us a 2-album deal. And we went out as the Mick Ronson Band. And so off we went and did all of that. It didn't come to much. And I carried on writing songs for Island Records and playing and so forth with a band called VHF, which is my band. And in the very late 70s, as we were coming into the 80s, when my dad died and all the rest of it, I thought, you know, treading the boards, because I was never going to be a star. I'm a good songwriter, I'm a good guitar player, I'm not a pretty boy, right? At the end of the day, I thought, well, you know, I was in a relationship, and I wanted children and all that. Living life playing a guitar on the road wasn't going to last, wasn't going to make a future for me. I could still write songs, and I organised a very good songwriting contract, which was bringing money, but I turned to media for a living, given the fact that I was reasonably well educated. I was good, you know, I'm a good writer. I'm good with words and understanding and feeling. So I went into the newspaper world. I started with the Express. I was the founding advertising manager for the then Mail on Sunday. and I did very well there. And I then became a founding director of the Today newspaper with Eddie Shah, the first newspaper in colour in the UK. And then we sold that to Rupert Murdoch. And then one day I got a phone call from a mysterious, deep-voiced man who turned out to be Robert Maxwell. Would you like to run my Mirror Group newspapers? Who turned out to be a complete crook, as you know. Not that I was. But I run the commercial side of Mirror from 1989 to 2000. I then invested in other businesses, and then another dear friend phoned up and said, I've got a newspaper group in the Caribbean, based in Jamaica. We need a guy just to turn it around, and how about you? And I sort of given up newspapers because I was getting older and I wasn't exactly without money. And I said yes. So that's but Island Records, who I had signed to, owned by Chris Blackwell, who is a white Jamaican. I knew Jamaica very well, so yeah, why not? Let's have some fun. And we did good out there. And I sort of wandered through. And when I got to Jamaica, what did I do? I formed a band, Black Zebra. A zebra is a white animal with a black stripe. Black Zebra is a black animal, because it was 3 Jamaicans, fine people, and I was the white stripe. And we recorded and we did well. And I'm still running the newspaper all day, and I'm out there with the boys, lively up yourself. Not exactly that, and had a good time there. So that's sort of how it went. I didn't plan to give up music. I would have loved to be a pretty boy, and be front stage. But what I really am is I'm a good songwriter and I'm a good guitar player, but would never make it.
You've been coming to Malta for quite some time now. I was wondering if you could tell us what you like about Malta and why you keep coming back.
Interesting in history, having studied it for university and so forth, I knew of Malta. Of course I did. Who could not know of Malta? I first came here in 1990, I think, and I brought my salespeople from the Mirror for their annual sales conference. About 220, 240 people, whatever. And that was sort of 1.5 days of conference and 2.5 days of, well done guys, have a bit of fun. But I sort of cut myself out of that, being the boss. And being interested in history and knowing of Malta, I decided to explore the island by myself for a day. And everything that I knew, and we're not talking about the Second World War, I knew about that, 1942, but the invasion of 1565, the Saracen attempt to take the island. I'd read much about it, and suddenly I was at the place. You can read all the books you want, but when you actually tread the ground, when you actually see Elmo, Angelo, and you've read all the history, I mean, it was fantastic. I could not believe the beauty of the place. And I also found very quickly that the Maltese people liked me. And it was a great experience. My friend Oliver Reed came here and died here, and he was of the same opinion. It's an extraordinary place, not the most beautiful place on earth, not the rarest place on earth, but there's a little, I don't know, spice, taste, feeling that makes Malta different from any place on earth, that makes it very, very special. And I think you'll find there's a George Cross up the road that proves that. Subsequently, I have friends here who've decided to live here in semi-retirement, so forth. And so I've come back, and we do a little bit of business here, a little business there. And it's just a joy to land at the airport, because there is Malta. And, you know, to be honest, when you have something special, a little treasure, why do you not enjoy taking it out of the box sometimes? I don't live here. and I don't think I'll ever will. But I always find intense enjoyment of just landing and being part of Malta again. And the people, I have to say, their generosity, their politeness, their standards in how they conduct themselves, at least to the restaurants and the places that I go to, are exceptional. Absolutely exceptional. And thank you, Malta.